My family pushed me to cancel my husband's insurance. Then my daughter-in-law slipped up. I never imagined my own son would gamble with his father's life for money. That day, I signed those papers. I signed away more than insurance. I signed away my last shred of trust in the people I raised. You know, there's something raw and vulnerable about sharing a story like this, something that makes you feel exposed. But if my pain can help even one person recognize the warning signs I missed, then it's worth every uncomfortable moment. So I'm asking you now, from the bottom of my heart, if this story touches you, if you see yourself or someone you love in my words, please consider subscribing. These stories need to reach the people who need them most, the ones sitting alone right now, wondering if they're crazy for feeling used. Help me help them. Stay with me through this journey, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. It was a Thursday afternoon in Chicago when everything started to unravel, though I didn't know it then. The autumn wind was pushing leaves across my front porch on Maple Street, and I was sitting in my usual chair, the one with the faded blue cushion that my husband Robert had bought me 30 years ago from that little furniture shop on Clark Street. I was wearing my gray cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons, and I remember my hands were cold despite the hot tea I was holding. The ceramic mug had a chip on the rim from when my granddaughter Emma had accidentally knocked it against the counter years back. I kept it anyway. I kept everything that reminded me of family. My son Michael had called that morning. His voice had that tone, you know the one, that careful, measured way people talk when they're about to ask for something. He wanted to come over with his wife Jennifer to discuss Dad's insurance situation. Those were his exact words. Insurance situation. Not Dad's health, not how we were managing, but the insurance situation. Robert was sitting in his recliner near the window, looking out at the street, but not really seeing anything. The dementia had been creeping in for 2 years now, slowly stealing the man I'd spent 43 years building a life with. Some days he recognized me. Some days I was just a nice lady who brought him meals. That particular day, he'd called me Martha 3 times, his sister's name. She'd been dead for 15 years. When Michael and Jennifer arrived, they came bearing gifts. Jennifer had brought a homemade apple pie, still warm, the cinnamon smell filling my small living room. Michael hugged me tight, maybe a little tighter than usual, and told me I looked tired. I was tired. I'd been up since 4 that morning because Robert had forgotten where the bathroom was and had gotten confused in the hallway. We sat around my dining table, the one my father had built with his own hands in 1965, the wood smooth and worn from decades of family meals. I ran my fingers along the edge, feeling the familiar grain, remembering Sunday dinners when Michael was young, when this table had been the center of our family universe. Jennifer cut the pie while Michael made small talk about the weather, about traffic on the Kennedy Expressway, about anything except why they were really there. I noticed how Jennifer's hands moved with practiced precision as she served the pie, how Michael's eyes kept darting to the stack of mail on my counter, probably wondering if there were bills visible, financial statements he could glimpse. The small talk felt hollow, rehearsed. Michael mentioned a colleague's promotion. Jennifer complained about construction noise in their neighborhood. Neither of them asked how I'd slept, whether Robert had a good night, if I needed anything from the store. Finally, as Jennifer poured coffee into my good china cups, the ones I only used for special occasions, Michael cleared his throat. The sound cut through the artificial pleasantries like a knife. This was it. This was the moment they'd come for. "Mom," he said, "Jennifer and I have been thinking. This insurance policy on Dad, the life insurance one, it's costing you a fortune every month. With Dad's condition, with everything you're already paying for his care, wouldn't it make more sense to cancel it? That money could help you now, when you actually need it." I remember the way the afternoon light was slanting through my lace curtains, making patterns on the tablecloth. I remember thinking how reasonable it sounded. Michael had always been my practical child, my number cruncher. He worked in finance downtown, had an office with a view of Lake Michigan. Surely he knew what he was talking about. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her nails were perfectly manicured, painted a soft pink. "Mom," she said. She'd started calling me Mom about 5 years into their marriage. "You've sacrificed so much already. Let us help you make smart decisions. This policy is just draining money you could use for groceries, for Robert's medications, for yourself. When was the last time you bought yourself something nice?" I couldn't remember. I'd been wearing the same 3 outfits in rotation for 2 years, washing them by hand to save on water bills. My weekly grocery budget was $37. I'd stopped getting my hair done at the salon on Division Street, where I'd gone for 20 years. I trimmed it myself now, in the bathroom mirror, and it showed. "The policy costs $850 a month," Michael said, pulling out a folder with printouts and charts. "Over a year, that's more than $10,000. Think about what you could do with that money, Mom. You could fix the furnace. You could get the roof patched before winter really sets in." He wasn't wrong. The furnace made terrible grinding noises. The roof had 3 leaks that I caught with buckets when it rained. I'd been putting off repairs because every dollar mattered. Every cent was accounted for in my careful budgeting. Robert's medications alone cost $400 monthly, even with Medicare. I looked over at my husband. He was still staring out the window, humming something, maybe a song from his childhood, maybe nothing at all. His hands were trembling slightly, the way they did now. He'd lost 30 pounds because some days he forgot to eat unless I reminded him every hour. This man who had worked 2 jobs to put Michael through college. This man who had built the deck in our backyard with his own hands, who had taught our son to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a man of honor. "What would Robert want?" I asked quietly. Michael and Jennifer exchanged a look. It was quick, barely a flicker, but I saw it. Some wordless communication that passed between them like a secret code. "Dad would want you to be taken care of," Michael said firmly. "He wouldn't want you struggling while money gets poured into a policy that, let's be honest, Mom, is only going to pay out when he passes. And we're all praying that's a long, long time from now." Jennifer nodded vigorously. "Exactly. And in the meantime, you're suffering. Look at this place, Mom. You need help. We want to help, but we can't if you're throwing money away." I felt something twist in my chest. Throwing money away. Is that what protecting my husband's legacy was? Throwing money away? They stayed for 2 hours. They showed me spreadsheets. They walked through my finances with the precision of accountants. They painted a picture of a future where I wasn't drowning in bills. Jennifer even offered to help me call the insurance company to handle all the paperwork so I wouldn't have to stress about it. When they left, Jennifer hugged me at the door. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. "Trust us. We love you." I watched them walk to their car, a new BMW, gleaming black under the streetlights that were just starting to flicker on. Michael had told me they'd gotten a great deal on it, some end-of-year sale. They drove away, and I stood on my porch until the taillights disappeared around the corner. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Robert, listening to his labored breathing. And I thought about trust. I thought about how the World Health Organization says 1 in 6 seniors worldwide experiences some form of abuse. I'd read that statistic in a magazine at the doctor's office. At the time, I'd thought how terrible. How could families do that to their own? I never imagined I might become a statistic myself. But I pushed those thoughts away. These were my son and daughter-in-law, my family, the people I'd sacrificed everything for. Michael was the baby I'd rocked through colic, the boy I'd driven to baseball practice every Saturday for 8 years, the young man I'd helped with college applications while working double shifts at the hospital where I was a nurse. Jennifer was the woman who'd brought me flowers on Mother's Day, who'd told me I was the mother she wished she'd had, who'd cried on my shoulder when she'd had her miscarriage 5 years ago. I had to believe them. What choice did I have? I'd built my whole life on faith. Faith in God, faith in family, faith that goodness prevailed. My mother used to say that time reveals all truths, that patience is the greatest virtue. So I would be patient. I would trust. The next morning, I called the insurance company. My hands shook as I dialed, and I had to hang up twice before I could actually go through with it. When the representative answered, I explained what I wanted to do. She asked if I was sure, asked if I'd consulted with anyone. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My son helped me make this decision. He's in finance. He knows about these things. The policy was canceled within 72 hours. Just like that, 43 years of premiums, of planning, of protecting my family's future, gone. I received a final statement in the mail the following week. I filed it away in the metal box where I kept important papers, underneath Robert's medical records and our marriage certificate from 1982. Michael called to check on me, asked if I'd gone through with it. When I said yes, I could hear the relief in his voice. Good, Mom. You made the smart choice. You'll see. Things are going to get easier now. But things didn't get easier. The $850 that was supposed to free me up, that was supposed to change everything. It disappeared like water through my fingers. The roof still leaked. The furnace still groaned. I still bought the cheapest cuts of meat at the grocery store on Ashland Avenue. Still counted pennies at the checkout counter while the cashier waited with barely concealed impatience. I started to notice things I'd been too trusting to see before. Small things. The way Michael always asked about my finances when he called, but rarely asked about his father. The way Jennifer's eyes would light up when I mentioned any expense I'd cut or any money I'd saved. The way they'd stopped inviting us to family dinners at their house in Lincoln Park, the one with the marble countertops and the wine cellar Michael had bragged about. I'd withdrawn from my friends without even realizing it. Betty, who I'd known since our kids were in kindergarten together, had stopped calling after I'd declined her lunch invitations 3 times in a row. I couldn't afford to eat out, couldn't afford the gas to drive to the restaurant she'd suggested in Evanston. I told her I was too busy caring for Robert, which was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I stopped going to my book club at the public library. I stopped attending my church's Wednesday night prayer group. I stopped seeing my cousin Patricia, who lived just 15 minutes away on the north side. I told myself I was being devoted, being a good wife, putting family first. But really, I was disappearing. Piece by piece, I was erasing myself, and I didn't even know why. My world had shrunk to the walls of my house and the interior of Robert's doctor's offices. I knew every crack in the ceiling of his neurologist's waiting room. I knew which pharmacy tech at Walgreens would give me a sympathetic smile when I picked up prescriptions I could barely afford. I knew the exact number of steps from my front door to my mailbox, 32, because some days, checking the mail was my only reason to go outside. Robert's condition continued to decline. Some mornings he didn't recognize our bedroom. He'd wake up disoriented, asking where he was, who I was, why he was in a stranger's house. I'd guide him back to reality as gently as I could, but each episode took something from both of us. The man I married was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. I'd find myself holding old photographs late at night after I'd finally gotten Robert settled in bed. Pictures from our wedding day, both of us so young and full of hope. Photos of Michael as a baby, as a toddler, as a gap-toothed first grader holding up a drawing he'd made for me. Pictures of family vacations to Wisconsin Dells, to Starved Rock State Park, to the small cabin we used to rent near Lake Geneva before money got tight. In every photo, we were smiling. We were together. We were happy. When had that changed? When had the distance started growing between us? I remembered the sacrifices I'd made. Robert and I had refinanced our house twice to help Michael with college expenses. We'd taken out a second mortgage when he wanted to get his MBA. We'd given him $20,000 for his wedding, money we'd been saving for our retirement. When he and Jennifer bought their first condo, we'd helped with the down payment. Another $15,000 pulled from our dwindling savings. Every time we'd told ourselves it was an investment in our son's future. Every time Michael had promised he'd pay us back when he was established, when things were more stable. That was 12 years ago. I'd stopped expecting repayment somewhere around year 5. But I'd never resented it. He was our child. You do for your children. That's what parents do. My mother had done it for me, working as a seamstress until her fingers were gnarled with arthritis so I could become a nurse. My father had worked at the steel mill for 37 years, breathing in fumes that eventually killed him, so our family could have a house with a yard. Sacrifice was love. That's what I'd always believed. I wondered now if I'd been wrong. The doubts crept in during the quiet hours, the spaces between caring for Robert and trying to keep our house from falling apart around us. I'd find myself staring at my bank statements, at the numbers that never seemed to add up, right, no matter how carefully I budgeted. The insurance money hadn't materialized into savings. It had been absorbed by life, by necessity, by the endless drain of existing on a fixed income that hadn't kept pace with inflation. I thought about calling Michael, about asking if maybe he could help a little, just until I got back on my feet. But every time I picked up the phone, shame stopped me. He'd helped me make a smart financial decision, he'd said. I should be grateful. I should be managing better. If I couldn't make it work, that was my failure, not his. So I said nothing. I smiled when he called. I told him everything was fine when he asked. I pretended I wasn't scared about how I'd pay next month's electric bill, or the month after that. I pretended I didn't notice that he'd stopped offering to help with anything other than advice. Jennifer still texted me occasionally. Little messages with heart emojis, asking how I was doing, telling me she was thinking of me. But when I responded, when I tried to share the reality of my struggles, her replies became shorter, busier. Eventually, they stopped coming as frequently. I felt like I was drowning in slow motion, sinking so gradually that nobody noticed I was going under. One Wednesday afternoon in late October, I was at the grocery store on Ashland, counting items in my cart to make sure I didn't go over my $37 budget. I had milk, bread, eggs, chicken thighs on sale, some wilted lettuce from the discount bin, oatmeal, and a small container of Robert's favorite applesauce. I was putting back a can of coffee because I was $2 over when I saw Jennifer. She was in the organic produce section, the expensive part of the store where everything was labeled with words like heritage and artisanal. Her cart was full: colorful vegetables, imported cheeses, a bottle of wine that cost more than my entire grocery budget. She was wearing a new coat, cream-colored cashmere, the kind I used to wear before I'd become so careful with money. I almost called out to her, almost walked over to say hello, but something stopped me, some instinct for self-preservation. I watched her from behind a display of canned goods as she selected items without looking at prices, dropping them into her cart with the casual confidence of someone who'd never had to choose between food and medication. My hands tightened around the handle of my cart. I watched as she picked up a bouquet of fresh flowers. $20. I could see the price tag from where I stood, and added them without hesitation. $20. That was more than half my weekly grocery budget. I thought about the wilted lettuce in my cart, the single container of applesauce I'd allowed myself because Robert loved it so much. She moved through the aisles like she owned them, her cream-colored cashmere coat swinging with each step. That coat probably cost what I spent on groceries for 3 months, maybe more. I remembered when I used to shop like that, before Robert got sick, before every penny had to be accounted for, before my son convinced me to cancel an insurance policy that would have made his wife's casual shopping sprees look like pocket change. She didn't see me. She checked out, the cashier packing her items into reusable bags while Jennifer chatted on her phone. I heard fragments of her conversation, something about a spa appointment, about meeting someone for dinner at that new French restaurant downtown, the one that had been reviewed in the Tribune, where appetizers started at $35. She laughed, the sound bright and carefree, like someone without a worry in the world, like someone who hadn't just helped manipulate an elderly woman out of financial security. Then she was gone, sweeping out of the store in a cloud of expensive perfume and entitlement. I stood there holding my discount lettuce and my 1 container of applesauce, and something inside me felt like it was cracking. My vision blurred. My chest felt tight. I had to grip the cart to keep myself steady. The fluorescent lights of the grocery store suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh, illuminating every shameful item in my cart with unforgiving clarity. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Really cried. Not the silent tears I sometimes shed while washing dishes or folding laundry. I sat on my bed with the door closed so Robert wouldn't hear, and I let myself break down. My shoulders shook. My breath came in gasps. All the fear and loneliness and confusion I'd been holding back came pouring out. When I finally stopped, when I'd wrung myself dry, I felt hollow. Empty, but also strangely clear, like I'd cried away some fog that had been clouding my vision. I walked to my dresser and pulled out the metal box where I kept important papers. I found the insurance cancellation notice and read it again, really read it this time. The policy had been worth $375,000. That's what would have been paid out to our beneficiary, to Michael, when Robert passed. $375,000. I sat with that number for a long time. I thought about the $850 monthly premium that had seemed so burdensome when Michael explained it. Over a year, that was just over $10,000. Basic math told me that at that rate, the policy would have needed to run for 37 more years before the premiums equaled the payout. Robert was 74 years old. With his dementia, his doctor had estimated he had maybe 5 to 10 years left, if we were fortunate. Probably less. The numbers didn't add up. The logic Michael had used, the spreadsheets and calculations, they didn't make sense when you really looked at them. $850 a month was a lot to me, to my limited budget. But measured against $375,000? Against Robert's likely lifespan? Why would Michael want me to cancel that policy? The question sat in my mind like a stone. I couldn't shake it. I tried to rationalize it away. Maybe Michael had misunderstood. Maybe he'd miscalculated. Maybe I was the one getting the numbers wrong. But I'd been a nurse for 33 years. I'd calculated medication dosages, converted measurements, managed complex patient care schedules. I knew how to do math. I couldn't ask Michael directly. Something told me that would be a mistake, that I needed to be careful now. So I stayed quiet. I watched. I waited. The following Sunday, Michael called to invite us to a family dinner. Well, to invite me. Robert wasn't mentioned specifically. "I haven't seen you in weeks, Mom," he said. "Jennifer's making pot roast. Come over around 6. I said yes. I didn't mention that I'd seen Jennifer at the grocery store, that I knew she'd been in town and hadn't called. I just said yes, and thank you, and I'd see them Sunday. I spent 3 days debating whether to bring Robert. In the end, I decided to leave him with Mrs. Chen, my neighbor, who sometimes sat with him for a few hours. She'd been good to us, bringing over soup when she made extra, checking on us during the winter when the sidewalks got icy. She was one of the few people who still treated me like a person instead of a burden. Michael and Jennifer's house in Lincoln Park was exactly as I remembered, spacious, modern, filled with expensive furniture and abstract art I didn't understand. Jennifer greeted me at the door with a hug that felt rehearsed, practiced. She was wearing perfume that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. Dinner was elaborate. Pot roast with roasted vegetables, fresh bread from some bakery on Armitage, a salad with cranberries and goat cheese, wine that Michael poured into glasses the size of small bowls. Everything was perfect, magazine-worthy, the kind of meal people posted pictures of on social media. We made small talk. Michael told stories about work, about difficult clients and market volatility. Jennifer complained about their housekeeper, who'd quit without notice. I smiled and nodded, and felt increasingly like I was watching a performance of a life I no longer belonged to. Then, over dessert, a chocolate cake from some French bakery, Jennifer's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and silenced it, but not before I saw the name, Pamela Berkowitz. I knew that name. Pamela was Jennifer's mother, a woman I'd met maybe 5 times in 12 years of marriage. They weren't close. "Excuse me," Jennifer said, standing. "I need to take this. It's about my mother's estate." She walked into the other room, her voice fading as she closed the door. Michael refreshed my wine glass, which I'd barely touched. "How's the house holding up?" he asked. "The same," I said, "still fixing things as they break." "You should really consider downsizing, Mom. That place is too big for you and Dad now. You could move into a nice assisted living facility, somewhere with staff who could help with Dad's care." "I don't want to leave our home," I said quietly. "I understand, but you have to be practical. Think about the money you'd save. No more property taxes, no more maintenance costs. You could sell the house, use that money for your care. Live somewhere clean and safe, where people could look after you." "The house is paid off," I reminded him. "It's the one asset I have left." "Exactly," he said, leaning forward. "It's an asset. You should be using it, converting it into liquid capital that can actually help you." I was about to respond when Jennifer came back into the room. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with something I couldn't quite identify. Excitement, maybe. She was tucking her phone back into her purse. "Everything okay?" Michael asked. "Fine," she said quickly. "Just estate stuff. Boring lawyer talk." She sat down and smiled at me, but there was something different about her now. Something electric, barely contained. She picked up her wine glass and took a long drink. "Mom was just saying she's still attached to the house," Michael said. Jennifer made a sympathetic noise. "I get it, memories and all that. But Michael's right. At some point, you have to think about what's practical. What if something happens? What if you fall and can't get help? What if there's an emergency with Robert and you're all alone in that big house?" "I've managed so far," I said. "But you shouldn't have to just manage," Jennifer countered. "You should be comfortable. You should be enjoying your retirement, not struggling to keep up with a house that's falling apart." There was something about the way she said it, the way her words had a sharp edge beneath the sweet tone. Like she'd thought about this speech, rehearsed it. Like she'd been waiting for an opportunity to deliver it. I felt my chest tighten. My hands went cold. I set down my fork very carefully, afraid that if I held onto it, I might shake. "I appreciate your concern," I said quietly. "Both of you. But I'm not ready to make any decisions about the house right now." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. Jennifer insisted on packing me leftovers in expensive containers I knew I'd feel obligated to return. Michael walked me to my car, an old Honda with rust spots and a rear window I'd repaired with duct tape. "Think about what we said, Mom. We're just trying to help." "I know," I replied. "Thank you for dinner." I drove home through the quiet Chicago streets, past the closed shops, and the few people still out walking their dogs in the October chill. I thought about the dinner conversation, about Jennifer's phone call, about the way Michael had talked about my house like it was a burden instead of a home. When I got back, Mrs. Chen was in my kitchen making tea. Robert was asleep in his chair, a blanket tucked around him. She asked about dinner and I lied, said it was lovely, said my son and daughter-in-law sent their regards. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table in the dark, and I finally admitted to myself what I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a long time, and I'd been too trusting, too desperate to believe in my family, to see it. I thought about putting away the leftovers Jennifer had sent, storing them in my refrigerator where they'd probably go bad before I could eat them all. Instead, I dumped them directly into the trash. Every perfect slice of pot roast, every carefully roasted carrot. It felt wasteful and petty, and absolutely necessary. Then I went to bed beside my husband, who was already deep in the confused sleep of dementia, and I stared at the ceiling until dawn. I didn't know what to do yet. I didn't know what was happening or why, but I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Something had to change. Someone had to start telling the truth. And if it wasn't going to be them, it would have to be me. The following weeks felt like living in a fog. I went through the motions of daily life, caring for Robert, managing the house, stretching my money until it screamed, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying that dinner, that phone call, the look on Jennifer's face when she came back into the room. Estate stuff, she'd said. Her mother's estate. But why would that make her so excited? Why would that flush her cheeks and brighten her eyes like she'd just won something? I started paying closer attention to things I'd previously overlooked. The way Michael's texts always came with questions about my finances, but rarely about Robert's health. The way Jennifer's calls had dropped off almost completely since the insurance was canceled. The way they'd stopped including us in family events unless it was a dinner at their house where they controlled the environment. I felt like I was going crazy, second-guessing every interaction, reading malice into innocent conversations. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe grief and exhaustion were making me see conspiracies where there were none. Maybe my son and his wife really were just trying to help in their own misguided way. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, that there was a piece of this puzzle I hadn't found yet. The answer came on a Tuesday afternoon in early November. Robert had a doctor's appointment with his neurologist, Dr. Patel, at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I'd dressed him in his good jacket, the navy one he used to wear to church before we'd stopped going. He kept pulling at the collar, confused about why he was wearing it. The appointment went as these appointments always did. Dr. Patel explained that Robert's decline was progressing, that we should expect more confusion, more disorientation. She gently suggested that I might want to start considering more intensive care options. I nodded and made notes I knew I couldn't afford to follow. As we were leaving, I stopped at the hospital cafeteria to get Robert some apple juice, which sometimes calmed him when he got agitated. While I was standing in line, I heard a familiar laugh from across the room. Jennifer. She was sitting at a table in the far corner with another woman, both of them bent over what looked like documents spread between them. I couldn't see Jennifer's face, but I recognized her coat, her hair, the way she gestured with her hands when she talked. I told Robert to wait right there, to hold onto the wall and not move. Then I walked closer, staying behind a pillar, feeling like a spy in my own life. The other woman was saying something about time frames and attorneys. Jennifer was nodding, pointing at one of the papers. Then I heard her voice, clear as a bell. So when the old man finally goes, we're looking at $375,000 minimum, plus whatever she gets from selling that house. Michael thinks the property's worth at least $400,000, even in its condition. That's over $700,000 total. My blood turned to ice. The room spun. I gripped the pillar to keep from falling. The old man. She'd called my husband, her father-in-law, the man who'd welcomed her into our family, who'd walked her down the aisle when her own father refused to come to the wedding. The old man. Like he was a stranger, like he was an inconvenience, like he was nothing more than a number in their financial calculations. The other woman. I could see her now, someone younger, maybe Jennifer's age, dressed in equally expensive clothes, leaned forward with interest. Jennifer was gesturing animatedly, clearly enjoying this conversation. The other woman said something I couldn't hear. Jennifer laughed again, that same bright, carefree sound I'd heard in the grocery store. I know, it's taking forever. The dementia could drag on for years, but at least we got her to cancel that insurance policy. Can you imagine? $850 a month when she's already broke. She was literally paying for Michael's inheritance while she starved. Now at least we're not throwing money away on premiums, taking forever. My husband's life, his slow, painful decline into confusion and fear, taking forever. Like his suffering was an inconvenience to their timeline. Like every day he held on was a day they were being cheated out of money they'd already spent in their minds. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The words kept echoing in my head. Paying for Michael's inheritance, throwing money away. She'd called Robert the old man. She'd talked about his death like it was an inconvenience, a delay in their financial planning. She'd convinced me to cancel a policy that would have paid out $375,000 to my son, all while pretending to care about my well-being. I backed away slowly, carefully, afraid they'd see me. Robert was still where I'd left him, confused but patient. I took his hand and led him out of the hospital, through the sliding doors, into the cold November air. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember getting Robert back into the house, helping him out of his jacket. I don't remember making dinner or putting him to bed. My body moved through the motions while my mind screamed. That night, after Robert was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table, and I didn't cry. I was beyond crying. I felt hollow, scraped clean of every emotion except a cold, hard clarity. My son and his wife had manipulated me. They'd looked me in the eye and lied. They'd used my trust, my love, my desperation to believe the best of them. They'd tricked me into canceling an insurance policy that would have secured their financial future, all while framing it as helping me. They were waiting for my husband to die. They were counting on it, planning for it, calculating their profit from his death like he was a stock investment about to mature. I thought about Michael as a boy, how I'd rocked him through fevers and nightmares. I thought about the way he used to hold my hand crossing the street, how he'd bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers. I thought about Jennifer crying on my shoulder after her miscarriage, how I'd held her and told her she was strong, that she'd get through it, that I loved her like my own daughter. Where had I lost them? Or had they always been this way, and I'd been too blind to see it? I made a decision that night. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't let this stand. I couldn't let them get away with this. Not for the money. I'd long ago accepted that I'd die poor. But for Robert, for his dignity, for the life we'd built together. They wanted to treat him like a commodity, like a payout waiting to happen. I'd show them exactly what that cost. I started the next morning. I went to the bank on Milwaukee Avenue, where I'd had an account for 32 years. I asked to speak with Mr. Harrison, the manager who'd helped me refinance my house twice. I told him I needed to know every account Robert and I had, every asset, everything. He printed it all out for me. It wasn't much. Our checking account had $813. Our savings had $2,047. Emergency money I'd been too scared to touch. Robert's small pension deposited monthly. My Social Security check. And the house. The house was worth approximately $425,000 according to the most recent property assessment. I asked Mr. Harrison about something called a transfer on death deed. He explained that I could designate who would inherit the house without it going through probate. I could change the beneficiary at any time. Right now, it would default to Michael as our only child. "Can I change it?" I asked. "Of course," he said. "It's your property. You can leave it to anyone you want." I thanked him and left. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes, thinking. Then I drove to the public library on Pulaski Road. The young librarian at the reference desk helped me use the computer. I searched for information about elder financial abuse. The statistics made me sick. According to the National Council on Aging, elders lose an estimated $3 billion annually to financial exploitation. Family members are the perpetrators in 60% of cases, 60%. I kept reading. I learned about the warning signs: isolation from friends and family, sudden changes to financial documents, relatives showing excessive interest in an elder's finances. Every single sign applied to my situation. I learned that in 55% of abuse cases, there's also emotional manipulation involved. I thought about how Jennifer used to tell me I was like a mother to her. How Michael would call me regularly right up until the insurance was canceled, and then the calls became less frequent. How they'd made me feel guilty for holding on to my house, for wanting to stay in the home I'd lived in for 40 years. I printed out articles, I took notes, I made a plan. That evening, Michael called. "Just checking in, Mom," he said. "How are things?" "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "Everything's fine. We should get together soon. Maybe Thanksgiving? You could come to our place." "That would be nice," I lied. After I hung up, I went to my bedroom closet and found an old shoebox where I kept mementos. Letters from Robert when we were dating. Birthday cards from Michael when he was young. Photos from happier times. At the bottom of the box was a small tape recorder I'd gotten years ago to record Robert, telling stories about his childhood. He'd wanted to preserve them for Michael. We'd made 3 tapes before the dementia took his memories. I picked up the recorder and tested it. Still worked. I put in a fresh tape and set it on my dresser. Then I called Jennifer. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm. "Hi, honey," I said. "I was wondering if you and Michael could come by this weekend. I want to talk about the house. I think you were right. I think it might be time to consider my options." I could hear the excitement in her voice when she answered. "Of course, Mom. We'd love to help you think through this. How about Saturday afternoon?" "Perfect," I said. When Saturday came, I was ready. I'd positioned the tape recorder in a drawer in the living room, left slightly open. I'd arranged my financial documents on the coffee table where they could see them. I'd even made cookies, Robert's favorite chocolate chip recipe, to make everything seem normal and welcoming. Michael and Jennifer arrived right on time. They were both dressed casually, smiling, relaxed. Jennifer hugged me and complimented my sweater. Michael asked about Dad. "He's napping," I said. "Let's talk in the living room." We sat down. I offered cookies and tea. We made small talk for a few minutes while I poured, my hands steady despite my racing heart. Then I said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you both said. About the house being too much for me. About needing to be practical." I saw them exchange a look, satisfaction, relief. "We're so glad, Mom," Jennifer said. "This is really the right decision." "I've been looking at my options," I continued. I wanted to understand what I'd be working with. So I went to the bank. I pushed the financial documents toward them. Michael picked them up, started reviewing them with his finance professional eye. "The house is worth about $425,000, I said, according to the latest assessment. "That sounds right," Michael said. I watched them. I watched the way Jennifer leaned forward slightly, the way Michael's jaw tightened as he calculated. They thought they were so close now, so close to what they'd been planning for. "There's something I don't understand, though," I said carefully. "When you helped me cancel Robert's life insurance, you said we were throwing away money on premiums. But I've been thinking about the math." Jennifer's smile flickered. Just for a second. "The policy was going to pay out $375,000 when Robert passed," I continued. "The premiums were $850 a month. That's about $10,000 a year. Robert's doctor says he probably has 5 to 7 years left, maybe less with the dementia progressing." Michael set down the papers. "Where are you going with this, Mom?" "I'm just trying to understand," I said, keeping my voice soft, confused, like I was genuinely seeking answers. Because if we'd kept the policy for even 6 more years, that would be $60,000 in premiums. But the payout would still be $375,000. That's a net benefit of over $300,000. "It's not that simple," Michael said quickly. "You have to factor in opportunity cost, inflation, the time value of money." "But I don't have other opportunities for that money," I interrupted gently. "I needed that $850 for groceries and medicine, and I still need it for those things. So where did the money go? Why did canceling the policy help me?" The room went very quiet. Jennifer's smile was completely gone now. Michael's face had gone carefully blank. "Mom," he said slowly, "I don't appreciate what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I'm asking a question. I'm trying to understand why my son would advise me to cancel a policy that would have benefited him significantly when his father dies." "Don't do this," Jennifer said sharply. "Don't make this ugly." Something in her tone, the sudden drop of the pretense, flipped a switch in me. All the careful control I'd been maintaining cracked. "Ugly?" I repeated, like talking about my husband as the old man. Like discussing his death as an inconvenience because the dementia could drag on for years? Like calculating how much money you'll get from selling this house after I'm gone? Jennifer went white. Michael stood up. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "I was at Northwestern 2 weeks ago," I said, standing too. "I heard you, Jennifer. I heard you talking to your friend about the insurance money, about how I was paying for Michael's inheritance, about how you got me to cancel the policy so we weren't throwing money away on premiums. You were spying on me?" Jennifer's voice was shrill now. I was getting juice for your father-in-law, I said. The man you called the old man while you calculated what his death was worth to you. Michael's face had gone from blank to red. You don't understand what you heard. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that my son and his wife manipulated me into making a financial decision that benefited them while pretending to care about my well-being. I understand that you've been waiting for Robert to die so you can collect. I understand that every kind word, every concerned phone call, every piece of advice was part of a plan to secure your inheritance. That's not true, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? I challenged. Then explain to me why you push so hard for me to cancel that policy. Explain why you never offer actual help, just advice that happens to benefit you. Explain why you stopped inviting us to family events after the insurance was canceled. Explain why Jennifer tracks my finances and suggests I sell my house. We were trying to help you, Jennifer insisted. No, I said quietly. You were helping yourselves. The confrontation lasted another hour. They tried every tactic: denial, anger, tears, guilt. Jennifer sobbed that I was being cruel, that they'd only ever tried to support me. Michael argued that I was paranoid. That grief was making me irrational. You're not thinking clearly, Mom, Michael said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he used when explaining financial concepts he thought were too complex for me to understand. You're under stress. Dad's condition has you confused. We were only trying to help. Help yourselves, I interrupted. You were helping yourselves to an inheritance you thought you had coming. An inheritance you wanted to make sure was as large as possible. Jennifer's tears stopped abruptly. Her face hardened. You know what? She spat. Maybe we were. Maybe we did think about the future. Is that so wrong? You and Robert threw money at Michael his whole life. And now suddenly, we're the bad guys for expecting a little something back? There it was. The truth finally breaking through the facade. Expecting? I repeated slowly. You were expecting our money? Money we earned, we saved, we sacrificed for? Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is pointless. She's made up her mind. She's decided we're monsters. But I had the tape. I had Jennifer's words, recorded on that hospital cafeteria conversation I'd gone back to capture with a better device, asking a friend to do what I couldn't. I had documentation of every time they'd pushed financial advice that benefited them. I had Mr. Harrison's written statement about Michael's multiple inquiries into my assets. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared, laid it on the coffee table between us. Let them see exactly how much evidence I had. Let them understand that I wasn't confused or paranoid or irrational. I was informed, I was prepared, and I was done being manipulated. When they finally left, they slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood in my living room shaking, and I felt no satisfaction, no victory, just a deep, endless sadness for what I'd lost. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. The next week, I called an attorney. Her name was Sharon Brenner, and she specialized in elder law. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she said, Mrs. Patterson, what they did is called undue influence. It's a form of elder financial abuse. You might have grounds for legal action. I don't want to sue my son, I said. I just want to protect what's left. I want to make sure Robert is cared for and that when I die, my money goes somewhere meaningful, not to people who saw us as a payday. Sharon helped me set up a living trust. We transferred the house into it. I named a local charity as the primary beneficiary, an organization that helped seniors with dementia care. Michael would get nothing unless I explicitly changed the documents. We also filed a report with Adult Protective Services just for documentation. I didn't press charges. I didn't pursue criminal action, but I wanted it on record in case they tried something else. Word got back to Michael within days. He called, furious, threatening legal action. I let him yell for 5 minutes, and then I said very calmly, You're welcome to try, but I have recordings. I have witnesses. I have documentation of everything you and Jennifer said and did. If you want to make this public, I'm ready. Are you?" He hung up without answering. Jennifer tried a different approach. She showed up at my house unannounced, tears streaming down her face. She begged me to reconsider, said they'd made mistakes but they loved me, that we were family. I stood in my doorway, and I looked at this woman I'd once loved like a daughter, and I felt nothing but tired. "If you'd loved me," I said quietly, "you wouldn't have called my husband the old man. You wouldn't have celebrated the money you'd get when he dies. You wouldn't have isolated me from my friends and manipulated me into decisions that hurt me. Love doesn't look like that, Jennifer, and I'm done pretending it does." She left still crying, but I didn't watch her go. I closed the door and went to check on Robert. The aftermath was harder than the confrontation. There were lawyers and paperwork and tense phone calls. Michael and Jennifer contested the trust, claiming I was mentally incompetent due to stress. Dr. Patel shut that down with a written statement confirming my complete mental clarity. They tried to turn other family members against me. My sister called, concerned, saying Michael had told her I was having paranoid delusions. I sent her copies of the recordings and documents. She called back 2 hours later, crying, apologizing for doubting me. Slowly, the truth came out. Other family members started sharing their own stories of Michael and Jennifer's financial maneuvering. An uncle who'd loaned them money they never repaid. A cousin who'd been pressured to invest in one of Michael's schemes. A pattern of using people and discarding them. I stopped attending family events where they'd be present. I didn't make an announcement or issue an ultimatum. I just quietly withdrew, the same way I'd withdrawn from my friends years before. But this time, it was on my terms. This time, I was protecting myself. And something unexpected happened. My friend Betty called. She'd heard through the grapevine that I was going through a difficult time. She didn't ask for details. She just asked if I wanted to get lunch. I said yes. We met at a diner on Western Avenue, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who called you honey. I told Betty everything. Not the legal details, not the recordings and documents, but the emotional truth. How I'd felt used. How I'd isolated myself. How I'd lost myself, trying to be what my family needed. Betty reached across the table and took my hand. "Welcome back," she said. She reintroduced me to the book club. She invited me to her bridge group. She helped me reconnect with people I'd pushed away in my desperate attempt to please Michael and Jennifer. I started going to church again. Not the big fancy one Michael attended in Lincoln Park, but the small neighborhood church on Division Street where I'd gone before. Father Murphy gave me a hug the first Sunday I returned. "We'd missed you," he said simply. I found a support group for caregivers of dementia patients. The meetings were held at the library every Thursday evening. Mrs. Chen agreed to sit with Robert for those 2 hours each week. In that group, I met others who understood. We shared resources, advice, and most importantly, we shared the burden of caring for someone who was slowly disappearing. They became my lifeline. I also discovered something that surprised me. I had anger. Real, legitimate anger. Not at Robert, never at Robert, but at the situation, at the disease, at the unfairness of watching the man I loved forget me piece by piece. In the support group, they taught me it was okay to be angry, that it didn't make me a bad wife or a bad person, that I could be furious at dementia while still loving the man it was taking from me. I learned to set boundaries. When Michael called, which he still did occasionally, always with some new angle, some new reason why I should reconsider, I learned to say no. Just no. No explanation. No justification. Just no. It was the most powerful word I'd ever learned. I also learned to ask for help. When the furnace finally died in December, I didn't try to fix it myself or go without heat. I asked Father Murphy if the church had resources. Within 2 days, volunteers from the congregation had raised money for a replacement. They installed it for free, refusing my offers to pay them back. When the roof leaks got worse, I applied for a city program that helped seniors with home repairs. A crew came out and fixed it properly, something I never could have afforded on my own. I stopped trying to do everything alone, and I discovered that when I asked, people wanted to help, not because they expected something in return, but because that's what communities do, what real families do. Robert continued to decline. By January, he didn't recognize me at all most days. He called me by his mother's name, asked where his father was, wondered why he was in this strange house. It was heartbreaking, but it was also, in a strange way, freeing. The man I'd married was already gone in all the ways that mattered. What remained was a shell, confused and frightened, and my job now was just to keep that shell comfortable and safe. I grieved for Robert while he was still alive. The support group taught me that was normal, that anticipatory grief was real and valid. I mourned the conversations we'd never have, the memories we'd never make, the old age we'd planned together but would never share. And in that grief, I found clarity. One evening in late January, I was sitting at my kitchen table paying bills when I heard a soft knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Mrs. Chen was with Robert in the living room. I approached the door cautiously. Through the window, I saw Emma, my granddaughter, Michael's daughter. I hadn't seen her since the confrontation. She was 23 now, finishing her master's degree at University of Illinois at Chicago. Before everything fell apart, we'd been close. She used to call me every Sunday, just to chat. I opened the door. "Hi, Grandma," she said quietly. Her voice cracked on the word grandma, and I saw tears already forming in her eyes. We stood there for a moment, neither of us sure what to say. She looked thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping well. She was wearing a Northwestern sweatshirt I'd given her 2 Christmases ago, before everything fell apart. Seeing her in it made my throat tight. Finally, I stepped aside and let her in. She paused in the hallway, looking around at the house she'd visited countless times growing up. Her eyes lingered on the photo wall, pictures of her as a baby, as a gap-toothed kindergartner at her high school graduation. I'd kept them all up, even after the confrontation with her parents. She was my granddaughter. That hadn't changed, no matter what Michael and Jennifer had done. We sat at the kitchen table. I made tea, the ritual giving my shaking hands something to do. Earl Grey, her favorite. I wondered if she'd notice, if she'd remember all the times we'd sat at this same table drinking this same tea while she told me about school, about boys, about her dreams for the future. She wrapped her hands around the mug and stared into it for a long time before speaking. I watched her. This young woman I'd rocked as a baby, and I saw Michael in her features, the same nose, the same shape to her eyes. But I also saw something he'd lost, or maybe never had, genuine remorse. "Dad told me not to contact you," she finally said. "He said you'd had some kind of breakdown, that you were making wild accusations and trying to cut the family off." I didn't respond, just waited. "But I talked to Aunt Susan," Emma continued, "and Uncle Frank, and I heard the recordings. I hadn't known they'd shared those with her. I felt a flicker of something, pride maybe, that other family members had believed me enough to show her the truth." "I'm so sorry," Emma whispered. "I had no idea they were doing that to you, to Grandpa." "It's not your fault," I said. "I should have seen it," she insisted. "I should have visited more. I should have noticed." "You were in school," I said gently. "You were living your life like you should be. This isn't on you, Emma." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Can I still see you, even though Dad said not to? I miss you, Grandma. I miss our Sunday calls." I reached across the table and took her hand, the way Betty had taken mine. "Of course, honey, you're always welcome here." She started crying in earnest then, and I got up and hugged her. She felt so small in my arms, this grown woman who was still somehow my little granddaughter. Emma became my connection to hope. She visited every week, brought her textbooks and studied at my kitchen table while I made dinner. She helped with Robert when he got agitated, speaking to him in a soft, patient voice that somehow broke through the confusion. She told me that her parents' marriage was falling apart, that ever since the confrontation, Michael and Jennifer had turned on each other, each blaming the other for the failed scheme, for pushing too hard, for getting caught. "I can't believe I thought they were good people," Emma said one evening. "I can't believe I didn't see what they were doing to you." "We see what we want to see," I told her, "especially with family. We want to believe the best because the alternative is too painful." "How did you finally see it?" she asked. "I stopped making excuses for them," I said. "I stopped explaining away the red flags. I started trusting my instincts instead of their words." She nodded slowly, taking that in. Through Emma, I learned that Michael had been fired from his job. Something about irregularities in client accounts. The details were unclear, but it sounded like the same manipulative behavior he'd shown with me had extended to his professional life. Jennifer had moved out. She was living with her sister in Naperville, according to Emma. The big house in Lincoln Park was up for sale. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, just a weary sadness that it had come to this. By March, Robert had declined to the point where I couldn't care for him at home anymore. Even with Mrs. Chen's help, even with the support group's resources, it wasn't safe. He'd started wandering at night, trying to leave the house. Twice I'd found him outside in his pajamas, confused and cold, asking strangers for directions to a home that only existed in his fractured memories. The final incident happened on a Tuesday night. I'd woken at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. I'd searched the house in a panic, calling his name, and finally found the front door standing open. He was 3 blocks away, standing in the middle of the street in his slippers, wearing only his pajamas despite the freezing March wind. A police officer had found him, was trying to coax him into the squad car when I arrived, breathless and terrified. Robert didn't recognize me. He fought when I tried to touch him, called me a stranger, demanded to know where his wife was. The police officer looked at me with such pity, I wanted to scream. That's when I knew. I couldn't keep him safe anymore. My love wasn't enough. My dedication wasn't enough. He needed more than I could give him. Dr. Patel helped me find a memory care facility on the north side. It was clean and bright, with staff who were trained in dementia care. They had security systems to prevent wandering. Nurses on duty 24 hours a day. Activities designed for patients at various stages of cognitive decline. It cost almost all of Robert's pension, plus a portion of my Social Security, but he'd be safe there. He'd be cared for. The day I moved him in was one of the hardest of my life. I'd packed his clothes, his favorite blanket, photos of us from when we were young. Emma had come to help, and together we'd driven him to the facility in silence. Robert humming tunelessly in the back seat, unaware that his life was changing forever. He didn't understand what was happening. As we walked down the cheerful hallway with its handrails and memory boxes outside each door, he kept pulling on my arm, trying to turn back. He kept asking to go home, asking where his wife was, getting agitated when I tried to explain. His voice got louder, more desperate. Other residents peered out of their rooms, some confused, some sympathetic, all of them reflections of what Robert had become. "Where's my wife?" he kept demanding. "I want Martha. Where is she? Why won't anyone tell me where Martha is?" Martha, his sister, dead for 15 years. I was standing right next to him, holding his hand, and he was calling for a ghost. "You're doing the right thing," the head nurse told me gently as Emma helped Robert settle into his new room. Her name tag said Carol, and she had kind eyes that had clearly seen this scene play out 100 times before. Sometimes love means letting professionals help. Sometimes it means knowing when to step back. But stepping back felt like abandonment. It felt like breaking a promise I'd made 43 years ago, standing at an altar, promising in sickness and in health till death do us part. I visited him every day. I'd sit in his room and hold his hand, even though he didn't know who I was. Sometimes he called me by his mother's name. Sometimes he thought I was a nurse. Once, for a brief, shining moment, he looked at me and said my name, Margaret, with such clarity that I burst into tears. I'd tell him stories about our life together, about the house on Maple Street, about Michael as a boy, about the trips we'd taken. I don't know if any of it reached him through the fog of his disease, but it helped me. It helped me remember that our life together had been real, had been good, even if the ending was cruel. The house felt too quiet without him, too empty. But it also felt like mine in a way it hadn't in years. I started making changes, small ones at first. I repainted the bedroom a color I liked, a soft sage green instead of the beige Robert had preferred. I bought new curtains for the kitchen, bright yellow ones that let in more light. I got rid of furniture we didn't need, things I'd kept out of obligation or habit. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece. Betty convinced me to take a class at the community center. Watercolor painting. I'd never painted before, never thought I had any artistic ability. But the instructor was patient, and I discovered I loved the way the colors bloomed and bled on the paper, the way you had to let go of control and let the paint do what it wanted. I painted Chicago scenes, the skyline at sunset, boats on Lake Michigan, the neighborhood market on Ashland. I painted Robert, too, from memory, the way he'd looked before the dementia, young and strong and smiling. I gave that painting to Emma. She cried when she saw it. Father Murphy asked me to join the church council. They needed someone to help coordinate the senior outreach program. I said yes, even though I'd never seen myself as a leader or organizer. But I knew what seniors needed. I knew what it felt like to be isolated, struggling, alone. We started a meal delivery program. We organized transportation to medical appointments. We created a buddy system so every senior in our congregation had someone checking on them regularly. I was helping others the way I wished someone had helped me. It felt good. It felt purposeful. In April, on a bright spring morning, I got a call from the memory care facility. Robert had passed away peacefully in his sleep. No pain, no struggle, just a quiet slipping away. I'd known it was coming. I'd prepared myself as much as anyone can prepare for the death of a spouse. But knowing didn't make it easier. The funeral was small. Emma attended. Betty and my support group friends. The church council. Mrs. Chen brought flowers from her garden. Michael showed up. I saw him at the back of the church, standing alone. I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't have the energy for whatever drama he might bring. But he didn't cause a scene. He just stood there through the service, and then he left. Afterward, Emma told me he'd cried. I don't know what to do with that information. Part of me wants to believe he genuinely mourned his father. Part of me thinks he was crying for the inheritance that would never come. Maybe it was both. People are complicated. I didn't go back to the house on Maple Street that night. Betty insisted I stay with her. She made me soup and let me cry and didn't try to fix anything. She just sat with me in my grief. Over the following weeks, I settled Robert's affairs. There wasn't much. The pension stopped. I kept what little savings remained. I donated his clothes to a homeless shelter. I gave his watch to Emma, the one his father had given him, the one he'd worn every day of our marriage. I was alone for the first time in 43 years, truly alone. It was terrifying, and it was liberating. I could eat dinner at 9 p.m. if I wanted. I could stay up reading all night. I could go to bed at 7. I could play music Robert had hated. I could rearrange furniture. I could do anything I wanted because I only had to please myself. The freedom was dizzying. I started traveling. Nothing extravagant. I couldn't afford that. But I took the Amtrak to Milwaukee for a weekend. I visited Springfield to see the Lincoln Historic Sites. I took a bus tour to Starved Rock State Park and hiked trails I never would have attempted when I was caring for Robert. Each trip was a reclamation, a reminder that I still existed, that I was still capable, that my life wasn't over just because his was. I also started saying no to things I didn't want to do. The church council wanted me to take on additional responsibilities. I declined. Betty invited me to join 3 new social groups. I picked one and politely refused the others. I was learning that I didn't have to fill every moment, that I could choose what added value to my life and leave the rest. It was revolutionary. One evening in June, I was sitting on my front porch watching the sunset when a car pulled up. Michael got out. My first instinct was to go inside, lock the door. But something made me stay put. Maybe curiosity, maybe a need for closure. He walked up the path slowly, looking uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked. I gestured to the other porch chair. He sat. We didn't speak for a long moment. The evening was warm, crickets chirping, a few kids playing basketball in the street down the block. Normal life continuing all around us. I could hear laughter from the game, someone's radio playing music from an open window. The world kept turning, indifferent to our family's implosion. I studied my son. He'd lost weight. His expensive suit hung a little loose on his frame, and there were lines around his eyes I didn't remember seeing before. His hair was graying at the temples. When had that happened? When had my little boy become this middle-aged stranger? "I'm sorry," Michael finally said. "For all of it. I was wrong." The words hung in the air between us. I waited for the but, the justification, the explanation that would make it all okay. I waited for him to tell me it was a misunderstanding, that I'd taken things out of context, that he'd really been trying to help. It didn't come. He just sat there, looking older than his 46 years, his hands clasped between his knees like a penitent. "I lost my job," he continued. His voice was flat, defeated. Jennifer left. Everything fell apart. And in the middle of it, I kept thinking about what you said, about love not looking like that. And you were right. He took a shaky breath. I kept trying to figure out when I became this person who could look at his own father and see a dollar amount, who could manipulate his mother and call it helping. "I don't even know who I am anymore, Mom." "What do you want from me, Michael?" I asked tiredly. "Nothing," he said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect to be welcomed back. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What we did. What I did. And I'm sorry." I looked at my son, this stranger who wore my child's face, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "You hurt me deeply. You exploited my trust, manipulated me, talked about your father like he was already dead. Those things don't just go away because you apologize." "I know," he said quietly. "But I don't hate you either," I continued. "I'm just tired of being angry, tired of fighting. I want to live what's left of my life in peace. And if you can respect that, if you can give me space and not expect anything from me, maybe someday we can find a way forward." He nodded. "Emma told me about the trust, about the charity." "And?" I prompted. "It's the right choice," he said. "Better than I would have done with it." We sat in silence a bit longer. Then he stood. "Take care of yourself, Mom," he said. "You too," I replied. He walked back to his car. Before getting in, he turned back. "Emma speaks very highly of you, of how you've rebuilt your life. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." Then he drove away. I sat there as darkness fell, thinking about pride and regret and all the complicated ways we fail each other. I thought about the version of my son I'd loved, the boy who'd brought me dandelions. Was that Michael still in there somewhere? Or had he been a fantasy I'd created, a person who never really existed? I didn't know. Maybe I'd never know. But I knew this. I'd survived. I'd been betrayed by the people I loved most, and I'd still found a way to stand up, to rebuild, to move forward. That was worth something. That was worth everything. Summer turned to fall. I celebrated my 72nd birthday with Betty and Emma, eating cake in my backyard and laughing about something silly. It was the best birthday I'd had in years. The support group threw a little party when I announced I was stepping back from regular attendance. "You've graduated," they joked, but they understood. I didn't need them the way I had before. I'd built a new life, one with support and community and purpose. I was still struggling financially. The house still needed repairs I couldn't always afford. I still had to budget carefully, still had to make hard choices. But the difference was, I wasn't being exploited anymore. My struggles were honest ones, not the result of someone using me. I found work, part-time, at the library, just shelving books and helping patrons find what they needed. The pay wasn't much, but it helped. More importantly, it got me out of the house, kept me engaged with people, gave me structure to my days. One Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after I'd overheard Jennifer in the hospital cafeteria, I drove to Northwestern. I sat in that same cafeteria, at a different table, and I ordered apple juice. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, so lost, so used, so desperate to believe the best about people who'd long since stopped deserving it. I thought about how far I'd come. Then I raised my plastic cup of apple juice in a silent toast to myself, to survival, to resilience, to second acts. I thought about all the women and men my age who might be going through similar situations right now, who might be questioning their relationships, their worth, whether they're being used. I wanted to tell them what I'd learned. Trust yourself. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't explain away red flags. Don't make excuses for people who hurt you, even if they're family, especially if they're family. You deserve respect. You deserve kindness. And you deserve to use your resources, your energy, your love on people who reciprocate it, not people who exploit it. It's never too late to start over. I was 71 when I reclaimed my life. You can do it at any age. Recovery is possible. It's hard, it's messy, it's painful. But it's possible. With the right support, with honest self-reflection, with boundaries and determination, you can rebuild. And finally, silence costs more than speaking up. Every day I stayed quiet about the manipulation, I lost more of myself. When I finally spoke my truth, even though it cost me relationships, I gained something far more valuable. I gained myself back. I finished my juice and walked out of the hospital into the crisp autumn air. The sun was shining, leaves were turning brilliant colors, and I had a watercolor class in an hour. I had plans, I had friends, I had Emma. I had my church community and my library job and my repainted bedroom and my yellow kitchen curtains. I had a life that was mine. So here's my question for you, wherever you are, whenever you're hearing this. Have you lived through something similar? Do you know someone who has? Have you felt that terrible weight of being used by people who should love you? Tell me in the comments. Share your story. You're not alone, even when it feels like you are. And if this story helped you, if it made you think or feel or recognize something you needed to see, please like this video and subscribe. These stories need to reach the people who need them. There's someone out there right now who needs to hear that it's possible to start over, that they're not crazy for feeling exploited, that they deserve better. Help me reach them. Together we can break the silence that keeps these situations hidden. Together, we can build a community where elders are respected, protected, and valued for more than their bank accounts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are worth more than what you can provide. Your value isn't measured in dollars or inheritances or what you can do for others. You matter. Your life matters. Your peace matters. Now go live it.